Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. I noticed the shift the way you sense weather turning before the forecast catches up. It started small, jokes about a celebrity she'd followed since college, quotes woven into casual talk, clips played while I stirred dinner, and she leaned against the counter reciting lines with that forgiving smile fans reserve for their favorites. At first, it was harmless noise in the room, the sort of background buzz every couple tolerates. Then the noise learned my name. He announced a 3-city charity tour with a limited after-party pass. The posters made it look like a civic event wrapped in stardust. Auctions for good causes, a moderated QA, then a private lounge for premium supporters. She brought it up like a dare wrapped in ribbon. "It's a perfect excuse to finally visit the coast," she said, laying a brochure on the table, voice bright enough to hide the tremor underneath. "Flights are cheap. Mia's already in. We'll dress up, get a photo, sip something fancy, and I'll be back Monday." "Get a photo," I said. "Get the story. Come home." She tilted her head, testing the ground. "He's famous for being nice to fans. There's this whole thing about hanging out afterward if the vibe is right. It's part of the legend." "Legends don't wash your coffee mugs," I replied, aiming for light and landing near worried. "Don't let fame walk through our front door and rearrange the furniture." She laughed, affectionate and dismissive in the same breath. "Don't be dramatic, it's one weekend." I couldn't sleep that night. I studied the soft square of moonlight on our ceiling and tried to name the unease. It wasn't jealousy exactly, it was the way attention can liquefy a spine. I knew how crowds work, how a room's heat can make decent people barter away their boundaries for 5 minutes of proximity. I also knew the difference between a screen crush and a decision. You cannot accidentally walk through a door you locked yourself. The week before she left, I asked to set a line together. At a little Thai place where the waiter knows my extra lime and her mild tofu, I reached across the table and covered her hand. "I'll never compete with a highlight reel," I said. "I won't try. But I need you to remember who you are when nobody's clapping. There's a line between delight and damage. Don't cross it. Not for a story, not for a selfie, not for a stranger whose job is to look like an answer." She twirled her straw, eyes softening. "I hear you. Say it in your words," I said gently, not as a test, but as a tether. She exhaled. "I'll have fun. I won't gamble the marriage." Then she squeezed my fingers and changed the subject to a lamp she wanted for the reading nook we never finished. On the morning of her flight, I carried her suitcase to the curb. Our dog trotted beside us with that confused optimism dogs have when wheels and bags appear. She kissed his head, then kissed me, quick and cheerful, a punctuation mark rather than a sentence. As the rideshare pulled away, she leaned out the window with that grin I fell for years ago and called, "Don't miss me too much. Text me a grocery list for when I get back." The car turned the corner and she was gone, leaving exhaust and a silence that felt like someone had turned the house down 1 degree. Work kept me sane the first day. Drawings don't lie. A beam either holds or it doesn't. I answered emails with clean sentences and measured stair runs until numbers pushed the fuzz out of my head. Still, when my phone buzzed, I checked it with the urgency of a man patting his pocket for a passport. At the gate, she sent a selfie. Sunglasses, coffee, chasing a dream, in the caption like a poster in a gym. Hearts flooded the screen from friends and strangers. I typed, "Be safe," and a heart I meant. She sent a comet. By evening, she and Mia were wrapped in city glow. Neon alleys, noodle bowls big enough to bathe in, a hotel mirror selfie where she held her phone high and angled her jaw the way glossy magazines teach. "This city is magic," she wrote. "You'd love the architecture." She attached a photo of a theater with deco lines. I stared at the picture longer than I'll admit, because buildings can be faithful when people practice being weather. The gala night arrived with a flurry of pings. "Hair done," she wrote, attaching a shot of loose waves and lipstick with a dare in it. "Dress zipped. Don't panic, it's elegant." It was. She had chosen something classic, not loud. She looked like the woman I married, only brighter, and I knew enough about lights to know they can scorch. "Remember our line," I texted. "Promise," she replied, and added a spark. Hours later, she sent a video from the QA, the celebrity on stage in a jacket that cost as much as our old Honda. He could make a room feel seen. That is a skill and a seduction. She wrote, "He's even better live. He told a story about gratitude that actually felt honest." I wanted to be gracious. I was, for a while. Near midnight, another message. "We got wristbands for the lounge. Only for donors. It's quiet in there. Safer." "Safer than what?" I asked. "Safer than the mob outside," she replied. And then 3 dots swam, stalled, vanished. I called. She didn't pick up. "Bad service," she texted. "Talk later. Love you." She attached a heart. The screen went still. I didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling darken back into itself and counted every car that passed like proof the world hadn't ended. At 4, my phone buzzed with a single tap back. She'd loved my last message. No words, no detail, just a little digital gesture that requires nothing of the soul. In the morning, the feed looked curated, not chaotic. A shot of the auction paddle, the plated dessert, the lobby chandelier. No lounge, no faces close together behind a curtain of velvet rope. Omission speaks fluent human, so do stomachs. I could have texted an accusation. I could have demanded step-by-step minutes. Instead, I set a new table. I had always believed anger makes messy work. I decided not to drag mud on the rugs. If there was going to be a reckoning, it would arrive dressed in clarity. The gift began as an idea that wouldn't blink. A mirror felt too on the nose, a speech too forgettable. I wanted something she could feel in her hands every morning until memory grew muscles. So I turned our living room into a quiet exhibit, not to humiliate her, but to make denial impossible. I spent the day printing our vows in the same font as our programs, with a blank box beside each line. The grocery list I'd found tucked behind the mixer from our first month together. Milk, basil, coffee, try that sauce Aaron likes. Because ordinary care is the real luxury no one photographs. A list I wrote by hand titled, "What Fame Will Not Do for You." I kept it practical. It won't sit through a budget meeting. It won't hold your hand in an MRI. It won't answer the door when your mother needs help. It won't learn the dog's medicine schedule. It won't tell you when a joke went too far because the crowd is laughing. It won't replace the quiet we broke to chase applause. I printed 2 columns on heavy paper: repair and release. Under the first, I listed steps we'd already discussed in calmer times, and pretended we'd never need: individual therapy, couples therapy, total transparency with devices and schedules for a season we'd set together. Stepping away from environments designed to dissolve good judgment. A hard stop on private rooms with strangers who collect attention for a living. An apology to my mother that names exactly what happened without props. Under release, I laid out the separation path if she couldn't or wouldn't carry that work. A timeline we could both live with. Division of our things by lists, not fights. No public theater. No smear campaigns. A signed letter to her own future saying what she chose and why, in case she forgot later and tried to paint me as the villain that pain often wants. I gathered photographs from shoe boxes. Our wedding day in the long-closed library where we whispered under alcoves. The Saturday we painted the hallway the wrong color and laughed for an hour before going back to the store. The plant she coaxed from a stubborn sprout into something that threw shade. Her birthday grill out where the cake slid off its base and we ate it with spoons out of the pan. I added 2 printouts of our bank's shared calendar showing deposit dates, not to weaponize money, but to record time, every payday, a vote for a life. I placed it all around the room at eye level with small labels like a museum. Before, building, bend, now. On the coffee table, I set a slim envelope with my letter. Calm, precise, not cruel. I wrote that I knew I did not own her, that I would never try to keep someone who wanted to be kept by strangers. I wrote that I would choose dignity over drama. I wrote that a choice made in a private lounge has public consequences inside a marriage. I wrote that I would love her enough to let her live with the results of her decision. I did not catalog suspicions. I did not rehearse hurt. I left space for her to speak. But I made the room honest. I didn't exclude tenderness. In the kitchen, I set a bowl of cut fruit the way I do when she lands tired, and I laid out her favorite tea. The point wasn't to starve her. The point was to feed only the part that could survive truth. That afternoon, Mia posted a boomerang of clinking glasses with the caption, "Nights to Remember." My wife wasn't in the frame, only a sliver of her dress in a corner, but I recognized the fabric. Later, a story flickered for 6 seconds. A velvet hallway, a security guard pretending not to see what he saw, and laughter, hers. Too close to a voice I knew from interviews. The clip vanished. 6 seconds can last forever if your blood knows what it heard. She landed the next day around noon. The dog met her like joy on springs, nails clacking a happy telegraph across the floor. She dropped the suitcase and hugged him, pressed her face into his fur, then stood, glowing with that brightness travel lends the face. "Miss me?" she asked, then noticed the house. She looked at the wall nearest the door, the way hikers look at weather on the horizon. Her smile folded itself away, and she stepped slowly into the living room, eyes moving across photographs, labels, the pages she recognized, and the ones she didn't. Her bag still hung from her shoulder. The room smelled faintly of cedar and the tea I'd just poured. "What is this?" she asked, not angry yet, only startled the way you're startled when a mirror shows a side you avoid. "A record," I said, "and a choice." She drifted toward the coffee table. The envelope lay there, my name handwritten on the outside because I didn't want it to feel like a subpoena. Her fingers hovered, then drew back, then settled. She slid the letter free and read, eyes moving fast at first, then slower at the lines that ask something back. When she finished, she didn't fold it. She kept it open like a map and looked up at me with something in her face I hadn't seen since our early years. Attention without pretense. "I told you not to let fame walk into our house," I said softly. "It came anyway. Maybe you opened the door, maybe it found a window. Either way, it's here. So we'll either choose the work that repairs us, or we'll bless each other as we part. But we will not pretend, not one more minute." Her eyes moved to the 2 columns, then to the vows with empty boxes, then to the list titled, "What Fame Will Not Do for You." She lifted that page and studied it like a diagnosis. "You wrote this while I was gone?" she asked. "I wrote it when the lights were loud and silence would have been a lie." I gestured at the room. "I don't need you to confess details to punish yourself. I need you to choose which life you're going to live." She set the page down with careful fingers. "And if I choose you," she said hoarsely, "and you don't choose me, back?" "I'm not a trophy to be won," I said. "I'm a person who can forgive if the person I'm forgiving shows up to do the work, not in grand speeches, in Tuesday afternoons when nobody's clapping." She took a step toward the photo of our first apartment, crooked shelf and all. "I remember this day," she said, almost to herself. "You insisted we could fix it without a level. You were wrong." She smiled. A real one this time, tired and true. "We bought the level. We fixed the shelf." "We could buy another level," I said. We stood there in the quiet that follows an alarm when you finally find the button. She looked down at the vows page, picked up a pen from the tray where we toss keys, and then stopped. "Before I check any box," she whispered, "you need to hear me say the words out loud." Her voice didn't shake. I crossed the line. The house held that sentence like a candle. She set the pen's tip on the first empty square and glanced at me, asking not for permission but for witness. "Say the rules," she said. "I'll hear them. I'll sign things worth signing." I pulled a chair back from the table, not to interrogate her, but to give gravity a place to sit. The dog curled under it with a sigh. The tea steamed. The light moved a finger's width across the floorboards. On the wall, our life stared at us without blinking. "Then sit," I said. "We'll go through both columns. We'll decide who we are." She sat. The pen hovered. She drew a breath, and the door between delight and damage, left ajar for far too long, began to close. She sat with the pen poised above the vows, the silence of our living room louder than any shouting match could have been. For years we had filled this house with noise, TV shows, laughter, background music, but now even the dog lying under the table seemed to hold his breath. "You said you wanted me to hear the rules," she whispered, glancing up. I nodded. "And I need you to know they aren't punishments. They're the price of rebuilding what you cracked." She gripped the pen tighter, her knuckles pale. "Say them." So I did. No more locked screens. Phones, tablets, emails. If you want to prove honesty, you'll live honestly. Complete transparency. Therapy, both together and apart, even when it's inconvenient. No private rooms with people who turn admiration into leverage, and no applause chasing. You don't get to confuse fame with love again. She winced at that last line, as though the words themselves stung. "And if I do all that?" "Then maybe," I said, voice steady, "we can repair. Not rewind, not erase, repair." Her eyes flicked down to the page again. She made her first check mark slowly, the ink pressing deep into the paper. Then another, and another. When she reached the end, she set the pen down with a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can make you trust me again," she admitted, "but I want to try." I leaned back, studying her. "Trying isn't about words anymore. It's about patterns. You broke ours. Now you'll build new ones." She nodded, and for once there was no protest, no charm, no deflection, only quiet acceptance. The days after were fragile. She seemed to move more carefully through the house, as though every action carried weight. At first I thought it was an act, a performance for my benefit, but when I overheard her in the kitchen one morning telling her friend Mia, "No, I'm not going to that party. I can't risk losing him again," I realized the work had begun. We went to counseling. The therapist was a patient woman who asked questions that stripped away excuses. My wife confessed things I had long suspected but never wanted to hear. That the idea of being chosen by someone adored by millions felt like proof she had value, proof louder than a wedding vow or a quiet Saturday together. She said she'd chase that proof because she feared one day I'd stop seeing her. Hearing it hurt, but it also explained. I told her my truth too, that her laughter at someone else's charm had felt like my presence was invisible, that her secrecy made me feel like a guest in my own marriage, that I could forgive a stumble but not a pattern. She listened, for once not rushing to explain away. Trust didn't come back quickly. There were nights when she reached for me and I couldn't bring myself to close the distance. There were mornings when I saw her phone on the counter and fought the urge to check it, but she didn't hide anymore. She'd leave it unlocked, screen up, as though daring the truth to stand on its own. The brutal gift I had given, the cedar box with vows, columns, photos, and mirror, stayed on the entry table. Every morning, before leaving, she opened the compact mirror, looked at herself, then at me. Some days her eyes were steady. Some days they wavered. But every day, she looked. Months passed. The celebrity she had idolized appeared in tabloids again. Different city, different fan, same hollow pattern. She saw the headline in the grocery store, paused, then set the magazine back on the rack without a word. That moment told me more than any apology could. Slowly, life began to feel real again. We cooked meals without tension simmering underneath. We laughed at old sitcoms, not forced laughter but the kind that sneaks out because you're comfortable again. She started volunteering at the community center, working with teens who needed guidance. One evening she came home and said, "Helping someone else feels better than being noticed." That line stayed with me. But I didn't let myself forget. Forgiveness isn't erasure. It's remembering without letting the memory control you. On our anniversary, I brought the cedar box back out. She froze when she saw it, bracing for another verdict. Instead, I opened it and removed everything except the mirror. "This," I said, placing it in her hands, "stays, because fame fades. But this," I tapped the glass, "will always tell you the truth." She held it carefully, nodded, and said, "I understand." We walked by the lake that evening. No crowd, no lights, just us and the sound of water against the shore. She slipped her hand into mine. It wasn't the handhold of newlyweds. It was tighter, as if she knew how close she'd come to losing it. Looking back, I realized the brutal gift wasn't just the box or the rules or the mirror. It was the confrontation with herself. The celebrity had given her nothing but a fleeting thrill. I had given her clarity she couldn't escape. It was hard, it was painful, but it was necessary. Not just for her, for me too. Because the lesson wasn't only hers. I learned that love without boundaries turns into blind worship, and blind worship always crumbles. I learned that silence can cut sharper than shouting. And I learned that sometimes the strongest revenge isn't leaving. It's forcing the person who hurt you to face the reflection they tried to avoid. Now, years later, the cedar box still sits in our home. Not as punishment, but as reminder. We filled it with new notes over time, not of betrayal but of repairs. I told you the truth when it was uncomfortable. I stepped away instead of lying. We sat through therapy, even when it hurt. The box became less about pain and more about growth, and yet the mirror remains, because every day she still looks, and every day so do I. That was the gift. That was the consequence. That was the lesson fame could never teach.